transforming cities from inside out, what a sustainable, healthy city means in New York and around the world. Here with us for this conversation, Joe Allen is director of the Healthy Buildings Program at Harvard. He researches healthy environments and their human impact. Nilda Mesa leads New York City sustainability initiatives for Mayor de Blasio. And Russell Unger is the executive director of Urban Green, the New York chapter of the U.S. Green Building Council. And they are here with my colleague, Steve Clemons. He's Washington editor at large for The Atlantic. Steve and company.
Good morning. How many of you are TSA members? Go through the lines. Put your hands up high. As I just want to refer to Greg Hayes for a minute because I know that he's right. So last time I was in TSA pre-line, I knew that only 1 in 5 had ever flown before. So it's great setup. Thank you all for being here. I am really interested in this question of whether, or, how we go green, how we basically credibly get there. And we've got 3 incredible panelists. And I just want to start out asking you in the beginning, does it anger you when someone, a company, a city, a town says they're going green, but they're not? Nilda?
I think it kind of cheapens the whole dialogue.
Would you guys have a club where the genuine green people, kind of spit at the ungenuine green people?
I wouldn't say spit.
Look, I'm coming away really inspired by what I just heard. You think about one of the biggest companies in the world saying that the CEO, Greg Hayes, telling us 2 most important things are innovation and then sustainability. Met with Bob Fox at Cook Fox Associates, designers of the Bank of America building right here at 1 Bryant Park. We met yesterday. They were talking about sustainability and health in all of their designs. So we see this companies embracing sustainability. So I'm actually more hopeful this green movement is real, and we see green being, health being part of that conversation around sustainability.
No, Russell, you're at an NGO that manages. I am, we'll move on to other parts of the conversation, but it does seem to me that this topic of greening cities, of climate change, is something where a lot of people are getting on. It's hard to find a company that isn't moving this direction. But I'm just wondering how credible that is. If everyone is really anyone?
If people are trying to fake green, we've won. They're eventually going to get there. It shows we have a product that people want. We have something that the population's clamoring for. So, I think in our world, the question is not, are we making things greener, or are we making things greener fast enough? Because just about anyone who says they're building a green building or developing green policies are doing something. It's a question of, are they doing it fast enough? How can we help them move along further? But I think we've won if everyone's trying to do green.
Well, and I think that part of the real question becomes how effective are the measures that people are adopting? Because if their intention is good to go green, but they wind up because of lack of knowledge or whatever it is, going for something that doesn't actually work, then they're wasting resources and they're wasting time. And at some point, if they realize that that's what they're doing, then it kind of becomes a little bit of an ethical issue as well. But at best, it's sort of why waste the resources, why waste the time then for people, and it distracts from what it is that you really want to do.
Well, Nilda, this is a nice setup too. I mean, you're basically responsible for the greening of New York City, as I understand it, one of the biggest, best cities in the world. But it's a big, complicated place. So I went and I read your tweets. You've got a great line of tweets. You should all go to Nilda. But you were talking, one of the things you retweeted or tweeted yourself was how New York City was beginning to see large, giant hotels that looked, just sort of like waste points for me, but the Palace and the Waldorf going green.
Right.
So could you tell us a little bit about the city's journey? But I'd also like you to go into the tweets you just said about a place like the Waldorf or a place like, because that's very counterintuitive to me. I wouldn't think at any point a building or an institution like that could be credible in this track.
The good thing is that, folks have been at this now for, a while, for a number of years. And so there are, sort of techniques and tools that are out there that weren't there, 10 years ago or so. So you can track things and you can, employ strategies that, in fact have worked for other large institutions and, other large buildings. One of the things that we like to do is we've set up a series of carbon challenges, and so we do it sort of sector by sector by sector. And the one that we most recently launched is the hotel one. So it's voluntary, but what winds up happening is that they share information amongst each other. They also, get information from past challenge participants.
Do you have like good hotel stars and bad hotel, pieces of coal?
No,
that you give?
no. It's more like, here are the goals that you've signed up to meet, and we're going to help you by giving you tools and giving you, advice and coaching, and set up the meetings with all of your peers so that there's, winds up being this kind of friendly competition. And we've seen that over and over again, amongst the various sectors. It's a very interesting dynamic. So they all kind of keep each other honest.
Now, Joe, you're in this business from a health perspective, which we talked in the green room, intrigues me. And you're in the public health department at Harvard.
Right.
And so you have a different window into this. And I'm wondering, just to go to Nilda's point for a moment, that this can be a friendly competition, this can be easy. Is it easy, or is the challenge more dire from a health perspective as you see it?
I actually think
Are the consequences more edgy?
No, I think we're overcomplicating it. And it's actually what I hear from this panel and everyone else and from the real estate community is they want the evidence for why. I don't want to be fake green. I want the scientific evidence that says if I make these changes, it's going to lead to reduced energy, reduced water, and then on the other side, improved occupant health. And one of the studies we just published 2 months ago looked at the impact of green buildings on cognitive function. And if you want to read this study, the website's up as thecogfxstudy.com, and we found a doubling of cognitive function scores for people who spent time in optimized green environments versus when those people spent time in a conventional building. So we see this is the kind of evidence that we can create as public health researchers that can then help decision makers and provide the evidence for moving this field forward, but grounded with hard scientific data.
When you look at cities around the country, which city in the world do you think is the best at taking what you're just talking about and incorporating it?
Well, we had
don't say New York.
I'm going to have to say New York because I've been talking with a lot of the, I'm a
Isn't there
I'm a
someone like in
scientist.
Finland or a
Well, no, they're
Scandinavian
doing
country
great
that's
work in
supposed
Europe
to
too.
be better?
But this is what I mean by overcomplicating. We have older buildings here. I think New York does a great job with, the greening of it with existing infrastructure. It doesn't have to be just brand new buildings. We can do this with existing infrastructure. We had a great talk last night with Mitchell Silva, the commissioner of the parks, and talking about New York's efforts to increase access to green space. So it's the building, but it's the contextual variables too, the space around the buildings, access to green space, it's air pollution. It's all intertwined with Nilda's work, with the parks work, and I think actually New York City is doing a great job.
Russell, you work with a circle of, stakeholders in this question and an NGO that looks at this. And I guess my interest in your part is where you like to go, but the real thing that interests me is, what's not there that needs to be there today for the goals that we have in mind to be achieved. And I'd like to go to Nilda about the city of New York in a moment and the sustainability path for the city and what it would look like. But there's got to be, in my book, maybe I'm wrong and I'm cynic, I thrive in cynicism, there's got to be something missing or something that's going to hurt that needs to be fixed, right? This isn't just a warm and fuzzy story.
Well, the issue is there's not a one something, and Nilda used the word.
You guys are all really nice.
Nilda used the word time 3 times in her remarks, and that's our challenge. We're not trying to build a park where we have 100 years to do it. We're trying to arrest climate change, and in the country, about 40% of greenhouse gas emissions come from cities. And if a city like New York can't lead and help show the way, who's going to do that? So our challenge is the entire system around buildings, the way they're regulated, the training of the architects, what the contractors learn, the products that are available. That's a really complex, wonderfully functional system. As soon as we make changes to it, that lasts a long time, but changing a system with so many pieces takes a lot of time, and we don't feel like we have a lot of time. The good thing is, though, every time we make changes, we're changing basically the DNA. We change a code, we change every building that's built after it, every building that's renovated after that, but it's going to take us that 30 years to see all those changes work in.
Is that fast enough? When I look at the climate change figures and look at the percentage change or the degree change in what had been achieved in Paris and in terms of trying to lock in promises to stop global climate temperatures from rising at a certain percentage, it still looks really scary. It looks like a John Cusack movie still coming at us. So I guess the question is, when does it begin to bite?
So it's biting now. I mean, the city's goal is a 80% reduction by 2050. Our estimates, we're on track to now about 70 by 50, which is a pretty good chunk on it. The reductions the rate of reductions has been accelerating in the city of New York in terms of buildings. We're not at the rate we need yet.
So Nilda, tell us how New York is beating Copenhagen. on
How
the
we're beating Copenhagen.
on the sustainability path. I know you've got some information you want to share about where New York is going to go.
Yeah, I mean it's a very interesting place to be doing this kind of work. We project that like 80% of the buildings that exist today will exist in 2050. So we can't just knock down everything and start from fresh. So we start with this aged building stock that has certain systems built in. You have to sort of put in what the costs are for that. But when you look at the city's greenhouse gas emissions profile, 71%, 73%, something like that, come from buildings and how they're operated. So that's what we are trying to address first. But in addition, though, only 2% of New York City's electricity grid comes from renewable sources. That's an abysmally low number. And it's something that, we think needs to be addressed because obviously it's, the electricity and it's the other energy sources that are going into the buildings, right? So, so everything is sort of interconnected, in that way. The other sectors that play into this are transportation and solid waste. We don't have as much greenhouse gas emissions coming from transportation as other cities, in part because hardly anybody, or not so many people here drive, and we have this great public transportation system. But, per capita, our greenhouse gas emissions numbers are lower than many, many other places. So we start, and, partly because of the density, there's certain, efficiencies that come from the buildings, being set up the way that they are. But we still have a ways to go, and I think that time is certainly a big challenge, and how we try to get more renewable energy into the grid is another big challenge. There's the graph that sort of breaks down how these things can look in the future. Let me just see if I can. Yeah. So this is the track that we have.
Is this what you need to do, or what you think you can do?
Both, actually.
Okay.
So, there are a lot of variables, right? So, if it winds up that we get a lot more renewable energy, renewable electricity, renewably sourced electricity in the grid, then, things change dramatically for building owners as well as theoretically, transportation. If there's electrification of, transportation and the grid is clean, then all of a sudden the profile looks quite different. But these aren't things that we alone can solve today or even next year, and it's something that we work with our partners, in the region and, the federal level and the state and so forth, to try to
Let me
address.
ask you an unfair question. If I were to be moderating a presidential debate and show this graph at either the Democratic debate or GOP debate, I think that there's a good chance, maybe less in the Democratic debate, but that Marco Rubio would point at this and say, this is the demise of the American economy. That doing this makes the broad American economy uncompetitive against other places. One of the data points in the United Technologies brochure here, which is interesting, is by 2030, the middle class is expected to grow from about 25% to 60%, and almost 80% of that growth is in Asia, actually. And so when you think about the future global, so those cities, to solve the global problem, need to be retrofitted like this. And I'm just interested in whether, how you respond to that. Will these cities in the future, will UTC be retrofitting these cities and helping the new cities become this? Or is this something that fundamentally makes a U.S. city less competitive than other places that are growing?
I mean, you can spend a lot of money doing this stuff. You can always spend more money and be uncompetitive. But the fact of the matter is that everything's kind of interconnected. So, if you're lowering greenhouse gas emissions from fossil fuels, you're also improving air quality, which makes a big difference for public health and for the future of, kids and for the parents who are taking care of them and the parents who are taking care of their elderly relatives as well. So the economy can be looked at in many different ways like that. Not every city gets retrofitted because there's plenty of new cities, and I would argue that with my fellow Cuban, Mr. Rubio, that it's flooding that presents a tremendous threat to the economy, especially
okay, you can run for office.
Steve, on your
Joe, go ahead.
Question. I mean, we have an answer to that one. I mean, New York had one of the largest real estate booms in history. Our economy's growing, and since 2005, greenhouse gas emissions from buildings reduced 12%. So our economy is growing, our industry is growing significantly, and at the same time, we're seeing energy use declining. So those are not inconsistent.
Wolf Blitzer would like that it fit within the 45 seconds of answer. Joe?
Yeah, I'd like to bring back health into this a little bit because we've done this experiment in the past where the answer is reduce energy consumption in buildings. We tighten up our building envelopes. This happened in the late 70s, early 80s, and then we introduced sick building syndrome. We made our buildings too tight. So I want to be sure that in the sustainability discussion, it's not a trade-off between energy or health, right? We know that we can optimize for both. With energy efficient systems, we can increase ventilation, provide more fresh air to occupants. We know there's 30 years of literature in public health literature on the benefits to this kind of environment. But too often, actually it's 100 years, it's been a trade-off between energy or healthy indoor environments. And in fact, the code that specifies the ventilation for this room is called the Standard for Acceptable Indoor Air Quality. It's not healthy air quality. It's not optimized air quality. It's a bare minimum. And we do that for energy efficient, for energy reasons. But so going forward, we can't have sustainability at the cost of occupant health.
In your world on healthy buildings and healthy living in buildings, is that something that's widely known? Are you avant-garde? Are you mainstream? I mean, you have to agitate a lot? I mean, what's...
No, I think public health scientists haven't been doing a good job. Because this research we just published got so much attention. We're finally talking to the real estate community. And to be honest, in these meetings, it feels like it's new. And I think things that we're taking for granted in public health about indoor environmental quality, we spend 90% of our time indoors. So to put that in perspective, take your age, multiply it by 0.9. I turned 40 this year. I've spent 36 years inside. We understand that the importance of buildings and the indoor environment to our health. And so we think about chemicals that we're exposed to, VOCs, ventilation, CO2. These are conversations we have in public health all the time, and we're just not doing a good enough job of talking to the community that can influence these buildings and environments for better occupant health.
Russell, I want to go to the audience in a moment, but tell me about Metered New York City.
Metered is a site we released because we tried to do kind of what Joe's talking about, try to make what's complicated to understand simple to understand. So the city, a number of years ago, passed laws governing large buildings that said they had to measure their energy use every year and report it publicly. And the problem was the data that was available was on a massive Excel sheet, and so technically it's public, but it's really inaccessible to anyone. So we took this,
So you're
translated
making
it into
shaming
graphic.
easier?
Well, if you're ashamed, then you're going to be ashamed. If you're proud, well, we've made it easier to be proud. So it really depends on where you're sitting.
I guess my last question, all three of you, real quickly. I'm really interested in data, and I sometimes feel I have the most privileged job in the world, where you get to talk to really smart people about what's coming. And this Internet of Everything, where sensors that talk to sensors that measure and that reaction from other machines, I'm not sure where people fit into it. Maybe it'll be great, maybe it won't. But does the sort of big data sensor revolution, where there's so much measurement in the system, does that create an opportunity for strategic leap and sustainability?
Beautiful question, not a plan. I started a group at Harvard called Harvard Sensors for Health. For this reason, we want to take advantage of these capability to monitor in real time the environment and people. And actually, in some of the work we're doing now, it's going to lead to big gains because we're able to monitor the indoor environment, but also human physiological response, and then have these devices talk to the building. So you can have autonomous control of the indoor environment based on human physiological response. So you can think about if you turn to climate change and heat stress and elderly. We're working in senior housing, saying how can we assist them with this control where it doesn't have to be so manual. It's just happening based on the human response, talking to the building.
Nilda?
Yeah, it's a very good question. So we're at a sort of point farther back from that because what we've done is we've collected, as Russell alluded, we've collected since 2007 all kinds of data on buildings over 50,000 square feet in New York City on energy use and water use and so forth. We've been relying on that data now that we have a number of years for it. We've been relying on that data to come up with different strategies. We've seen particularly like building typologies, and we're coming up with what are the templates that we might be able to use for these different types of buildings to make the strategies a lot easier for building owners and for policymakers and so forth to figure out.
Russell, thoughts?
I think data is what makes the New York City policymaking and green building movement so different than elsewhere. And I think it was a revolution that was caused by the city, which is saying, this is not just abstract planning. We're going to use numbers as best as we can. And so I think it's the thing that's distinguished New York City in its planning. And I think the ability to keep that data as accurate as possible is going to be key to our planning in the future. And the next step in that is getting a lot more data about how energy is used within individual buildings. Because we have a rough idea of that, but we have to go into a lot more buildings to figure
Does
that out.
everybody measure the same data?
No.
All right, thanks. Let me open to the floor. Comments, questions from the floor. I'm going to call on you. Okay, right here, yes. Let me bring you the microphone. Millions of people are watching online right now in a very sustainable way.
Hi, I'm Evan Epstein. I'm with SL Green, a real estate company in the city. And I was wondering what you thought about the WELL certification, if you think it goes far enough for...
Can you say that again? What kind of certification?
WELL certification.
Yeah, I think what's really nice in this idea of building rating systems, certainly the U.S. Green Building Council and LEED set this into motion, this 20-year, now maybe 30-year path towards the greening of our buildings with a focus on energy and water and also indoor environmental quality. And then so the movement is clearly moving from green buildings that focus on what I think is easy to measure, energy and water, to things that are more difficult to measure, which is how do you measure and quantify human health? So we just ask people in this room. It's a little more intangible. It's not a trivial question. It's really easy to meter a building. So I like that the whole movement in general, including rating systems, is moving towards incorporating health into the discussion, where green means healthy also. Right?
Other questions? Yes, in the very back.
What was the cost to lower Manhattan businesses of Hurricane Sandy and the flooding for weeks? People in some businesses went out of business because of that. And then what's the solution that's possible and fundable?
Nilda?
I couldn't give you that figure off the top of my head, but
Just say huge.
It was massive, yeah, and it was huge, in fact. So, one of the things that the city is doing is preparing, sort of a series of a strategy for some of the coastal areas, in particular in, Lower Manhattan and Brooklyn and so forth, and setting it. We just got an enormous amount of money from HUD to set up a kind of a barrier system and also to do some design and planning for the parts of Manhattan that, intersect with the water. So there's more information on that on the city's website, and there are some, drawings and designs and so forth.
It's a great question, and it's one of the ones that I'll ask some folks on the next panel, actually. And there's a co-founder of a company called Terraform, which, if I get it right, is sort of looking back at what nature can share with us by way of design and building. And I know Chris Christie and others have talked about restoring a lot of the coastal area and going back to certain of kind of nature zone protections. As city managers and planners, is there sort of a choice between concrete and natural stuff that you're thinking about today?
I wouldn't say there's a choice. I think that different parts of the city lend themselves to different strategies. So
The
there's
concrete
also
pushers.
No, so there's sort of wetlands restoration that's appropriate in certain parts of the city, like like in Brooklyn and Queens, for example. And then there are going to be other strategies like around Lower Manhattan that lend themselves less so to wetlands restoration and putting back marshlands than to putting in barriers.
Other question? Yes, right here in the middle. Let me bring you the mic.
Sure, thank you. My name is Thomas Bad-Matheson. I work with sustainability.
Are you from Copenhagen by any chance?
I'm from Oslo.
Ah,
Yes.
See, I knew there was someone out there. How's Oslo doing compared to New York?
Well, we have the fortune of having a lot of new developments, and so we can build new. But there are definitely some very stringent standards on environmental aspects. Like, for example, there needs to be daylight in every room, in every office, etc. So, on that note, I have a question about the very interesting Harvard study. You mentioned that numbers, incredible numbers in some senses, cognitive functioning can double by moving someone into a room with optimized air. So how do you move beyond, a number like that can create some skepticism. I can double the performance of my functioning. How do you move the conversation beyond that skepticism to have people integrate that into the solutions?
I'm just going to let him moderate the next session. It's a
Sure.
good question.
I think that's a really good question. None of these studies stand alone, right? We're all building upon what I see as 30 years of evidence around the impact of buildings on our health. And this one extends it to cognitive function score, decision-making performance. And there are others now that are supporting this too. So I hope that this kind of study will lead to 100 new questions that we can build off this. So, this is not the standalone study that existed and that's it. It's building on 30 years of public health research. And so I think that's it's a good question about taking this and putting it into practice. But I think this is coming from the demands of the community too, to say we need more public health data, and it's been around. This is one that gets us to the question of productivity, which speaks directly to the interests of businesses.
Nilda, Russell, any thoughts?
Well, I think also with your study, it was the cognitive function test. So you're not claiming in the study that you're going to go into this room and all of a sudden you're producing twice as much product for the amount of time. But I mean, how does this get used? I mean, we're using that. I mean, we're designing a new office. We're going to have CO2 kind of controlled ventilation, in part because of Joe's study, sitting through it. A number of my colleagues.
Do you have a super cool office that's super healthy?
We don't yet. We
Yeah.
will.
Uh-huh.
We will. We're designing it right now.
I always wonder about the green building people, if they really, have.
We don't have
awesome-
money. We can't have
Yeah.
a super cool anything unless people donate it to us.
You have a super cool tie.
Thank you.
Nilda?
I think it's something that the city moves at a slow pace sometimes, and so I think it's something that we need to be looking at more holistically as we're looking at.
Does the mayor
building
hang out with
standards.
your group?
Hang out.
Well, usually when I interview cabinet secretaries, one of the measures of power in Washington is how much time that cabinet secretary actually gets with the president. So if the president's not in the game, we can be talking. So it's
he's
interesting.
way-
Does
yeah,
Mayor de
he's
Blasio
way
come out and
into-
hang out with the team, say, go get them?
He doesn't. His schedule doesn't quite work like that, but he sends a lot of emails on weekends.
He does.
Yeah.
Okay, so he sends. So he has. You have the light of Bill de Blasio on your.
He's
on your terrain.
really this is.
And does
he's
everybody
really,
see that in the rest of the city?
Yeah.
So does that become the way in which you seduce or cajole other parts of the city to move along?
I
your
think
direction?
it's funny because when we did One NYC last year, we worked with it was like over 70 agencies, and everybody was in the room. All the agency heads were in the room together when the mayor kicked off the whole thing, and everybody saw, and they all contributed to it, and everybody saw that this is really a team effort. So there's not a whole lot of pushback actually on these goals.
I saw a hand up in the very back over here. Yes, right there.
Thank you. I'm Nancy Anderson from the Salon
morning.
Foundation. You've all spoken so eloquently about the importance of and the power of data to transform and move the sustainability agenda. So I was wondering if who could cast some light on whether the data revolution has come to urban real estate markets in terms of valuing green building and those lenders that provide the finance for new construction, sales, or renovation work.
Great question. Thoughts on the real estate industry and whether it feels the pressure to go green and to reward, I guess the real question is to reward and value economically the green movement.
So what I can tell you is what I do hear. I can only speak secondhand on this, but I do hear from major owners. And LEED certification is standard in Class A buildings in New York, particularly office buildings. The reason for that is it's what tenants are asking. It doesn't have to be every tenant. You just need to have, if you have your office building empty a month less, because of that, you paid for it. And so there basically is not a new major office building going up in New York City that is not green, that's not LEED certified, and that's because of what they're hearing from tenants. I don't know how much that's based on the analysis they're doing or just the conversations they have. And those who are leading the industry, they know what's happening. They don't need to see the numbers. They know what tenants are asking for.
Nilda?
Yeah, I think that one of the obstacles that we have is in the soft cost part of it and getting sort of the uptake. And so like we just launched a few months ago a retrofit accelerator, which goes for buildings that are 50,000 square feet and above, the buildings for which we have all of this data. And what we are trying to do with that is go directly to the building owners and the building managers and say, look, with this type of building, here are, looking at the data that we have citywide, these are the kinds of strategies that other buildings in your class of your age are, employing, and here's where you can get, opportunities for financing, whether it be from, or incentives, whether it be from the state or Con Ed or, banks or, whatever. But there's a lot of work that I think still needs to be done in this area.
Joe?
Yeah, I think all you have to do is look at where the pension funds are investing, and they're investing in green infrastructure and green buildings. It's clear, and I'll tell you what's coming next, is that they're starting to say we're going to invest in health, and that includes buildings and occupants and health throughout all aspects of business. We've been contacted at this Harvard Center for Health and Global Environment by funds that are looking to invest and looking for help to say what are the metrics we should use to say how do I rate a building, a city, a region, a portfolio based on its dedication towards health. So it's been towards green building, energy efficiency, and the pension funds are starting to move towards focusing on health.
I want to thank all of you. This has been a great conversation, went in directions I didn't expect, and I want to apologize to Russell because I hit him accidentally right before we came in, and you've been very nice about it. So Russell Unger, thank you very much with Urban Green, Nilda Mesa with the Office of Sustainability in the New York City Mayor's Office, and Joseph Allen, Director of the Healthy Buildings Program at Harvard Center for Health and the Global Environment. Thank you all very, very much. Thank you. So great. Thank you.